The second theme that your textbook authors have come up with for biology is this theme of information. So when you look at a cell, how does a cell know how to grow, how to function as a liver cell or a skin cell or a muscle cell? Well, earlier we talked about how eukaryotic cells, for example, have these compartments, right? These organelles that are membrane bound, and each compartment has a specific function. Well, one of the most conspicuous organelles within a eukaryotic cell is the nucleus. And sometimes the nucleus is thought to be the brain of the cell because it holds all the information the cell needs to be able to function. What is it that that nucleus holds that allows it to tell the cell what to do? Well, within cells, whether or not they have a nucleus, they do have this information, this genetic information, this genetic material that's in the form of molecules of DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and it is these DNA molecules that actually hold the information and tell the cell how it's supposed to behave. So in the pictures that you see down below, this is actually a newt lung cell that's going through cell division. It's one cell that's going to divide into two cells, and the cell's been stained with multicolored probes. So you've got, for example, the probe that's in blue. This is a fluorescent probe that binds specifically to DNA. So you can see actually these molecules of DNA in blue being separated, pulled to opposite poles of the cell, as the cell goes from one cell in the left image over to two cells in the image on the right-hand side. Now, as we look at DNA, one long DNA molecule holds hundreds to thousands of what are called genes, these small snippets of information that code for different cellular products. And this one long DNA molecule we call a chromosome. If you look at the structure of the DNA or the structure of the chromosome, it's actually two strands of material that have been sort of wound together to form a double helical shape. So in the image here you can see that on the right hand side you've got this long chain of these subunits that are called nucleotides. So one nucleotide holds one of these letter shapes plus a blue and a yellow. And we'll learn what all these stand for as we dive a little bit deeper into the structure of DNA at the end of the semester. So you've got these nucleotides that are stacked one on top of each other to form this long chain. And then to make a DNA molecule, you actually take two of these chains, stick them together, and then twist. Now, the way that the genetic information is stored within the DNA is actually in the sequence of these different parts of the nucleotides. These are called the bases or the nitrogenous bases, and they come in 4 different flavors for DNA. You've got your A's, your T's, your C's, and then your G's. And so depending on the sequence or the order of those A's, T's, C's, and G's, you can code for different genes, different proteins, different cellular products. And so what does the DNA actually code for? What sort of information does it hold? Well, it holds all the information that controls how you develop, how you grow, and how your body and your cells are maintained. So if you think about it, we all start out as a single cell. So you've got your egg cell here. It meets up with a sperm cell during fertilization, and that forms a single fertilized egg, which we call a zygote. And that will divide into 2 cells, and then 4 cells, and then 8 cells. And then some of those cells are going to start to differentiate, and they're going to become your liver cells and your pancreatic cells and your heart cells. And eventually, you'll end up developing into one of these little cuties over there. And the DNA holds all of that information on when, what processes are supposed to take place. And that information is held within those small units of inheritance that we call genes. Each gene codes for some sort of cellular product, typically a protein. Now, the interesting thing is that genes themselves don't actually produce the protein. This process is an indirect process. Actually, the information in the DNA is first taken and transcribed into a smaller molecule called RNA. And then this RNA now holds the information just for that one specific gene that the cell is interested in, and the RNA can then be translated into a particular protein. And this whole entire process going from your DNA to RNA to, that's still too big, protein, right? That whole entire process is called gene expression. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time going through that process again at the end of the semester. And this is essentially the process of converting the information stored in the gene to an actual cellular product. Now, you can imagine that the DNA holds a lot of information. And so naturally scientists would want to know what exactly is all that information. What is the sequence of all those A's, T's, C's, and G's that code for those hundreds and thousands of genes, even just along the length of one DNA molecule? And so we've done this. We've taken what is called the genome, or the entire set of genetic instructions for an organism, and we've sequenced them. We've done this for the human, for example. I'm sure you've heard of the Human Genome Project, right? It was completed almost 20 years ago now, and it cost $3 billion, but we did it. We sequenced the entire human genome. We've done this for a lot of other organisms as well, particularly those that we use as model organisms for research science. So things like rodents, mice, rats, their genomes have been sequenced. Dogs, cats, soil worms, fruit flies, frogs. We have a pretty good handle on the genomes of all those basic research-based organisms. And this has opened up a field of study in biology too called genomics. And this is where individuals can study sets of genes either within a particular species or even between species. DNA has allowed us to see connections in evolution that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to see before between species, which is definitely very interesting. All right, our third theme that your authors have put here in chapter 1 is this theme of energy and matter. And this is a very short little theme. It only has one slide to it, but don't overlook it. It is actually very important, something that we'll come back to later on in the semester when we talk about cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So energy and matter, right? How are they used within our biosphere, or maybe more specifically within an ecosystem? So in this little figure down here, we have an image of a small ecosystem. So you've got a little plant there, you've got the soil, you've got the air, you've got some decomposers, you have a little caterpillar, a little consumer there. And so there are two things to consider here. How is energy used within an ecosystem, and then how is matter used within an ecosystem? And they're used differently. So for energy, energy flows through an ecosystem. It's a one-way street. It goes in, and then it goes out. So you can see this top arrow here will show you energy in an ecosystem comes in primarily as light energy from the sun. And here it gets picked on organisms that are photosynthetic. They can absorb that light energy and convert it into chemical energy, which is then used by them and by any other organisms that eat those photosynthetic organisms. As the energy now being converted to chemical energy is used, it's used to do things like move, for example. And when you move, right, you end up giving off a lot of that energy in the form of heat. That heat leaves your body and it goes off into the ecosystem, the air, and then it leaves the ecosystem and goes off into the great beyond. So again, energy is going to flow. It's a one-way street through an ecosystem. It comes in as light energy, and it leaves as heat. Matter, on the other hand, is recycled. So if you think about the different elements that are used to build our bodies or to build plants, all of those are going to be recycled. They don't necessarily very frequently come in to our ecosystem or into our planet, and they don't very frequently leave our planet either. And so you can see this blue circle here showing you that chemical cycling. So you'll have chemicals, elements that are in the soil, for example, and the plant will take those in through its roots, and will use them to build parts of the plant itself. The little caterpillar here will consume parts of the plant. The chemicals get transferred to the caterpillar. Let's say the caterpillar dies. It'll fall down here. The decomposers will help then to deconstruct that caterpillar back down to individual elements and chemicals, and those will be returned to the soil for a new plant to take those up. And so it's a nice little cycle here for the chemicals within an ecosystem.